Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover Podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. Hope everybody is having a good July so far. First time we've linked up with y'all since the 4th of July. So hope everybody had a good holiday weekend. We've brought back the roundtable for the first time really since the season, I think. Well, Christian hasn't been on here yet, but we had one a couple weeks ago with Mark and Jason. So this is Christian's first roundtable. But I had an idea for a podcast today as we bring everybody here on the screen. We got Christian, we got Jason, and we got Mark. We've been previewing the schedule. We've been going through game by game and having podcast hosts on to talk about their thoughts on whatever team it is that they cover. Next up in that will be the Week 7 game at Ole Miss. But I thought it would be interesting for us to all go through and talk about not the easiest games, not the hardest games, not picking the games, not saying which games you think Auburn's going to win, but by confidence. So the exercise here is similar to the bowl pick'em system. I think ESPN, I haven't done that in years, but however many bowl games there are, whatever game you're most confident in, you give that a 38. If they win that game, then you get 38 points. And then on the opposite end, whatever game you're least confident in, you're only going to give that 1 point. So it's the same system here. Everybody is aware of the rules. So everybody has brought their 12 through 1 rankings here to the table. And Jason had the good idea to go through by ranking and not by week of the schedule. So if that's not super confusing for everybody, we're going to go ahead and get rolling here with number 12. I assume we've all got the same one. Why don't we go, if you guys are seeing it, we'll go Jason, Christian, and then Mark, and then we'll snake it back every time. So we'll start with Jason and then go to Christian, then Mark, and then Mark, Christian, Jason. For number 12 here, which game, Jason, are you the most confident that Auburn is going to win and would be the most surprised if Auburn didn't win in the 2022 season?
Yeah, I got to start right out of the gate. I'm assuming that most people probably put Mercer at 12. That's what I have at number 12. I think that's one that, just from a physical standpoint, depth, everything that matters in that scenario, I think that's a game that you have to expect that should be the easiest on the Auburn schedule.
Yeah, I've
Christian,
got
I assume you agree.
Same reasoning. I mean, season opener, you're not going to be coming in with any injuries or any low morale or any other really exterior factors. Most likely, Mercer at 12.
Yeah, I've got Mercer at 12, and even though they're ranked in a lot of variety of FCS polls, the Southern Conference has some pretty good teams in football. And you remember last year, Mercer gave Alabama some problems. You go back and look at the statistics of that game. Alabama did not dominate Mercer, but still Auburn recruits at a different level than Mercer. And like Christian said, opening game, there'll be excitement. Auburn should be healthy. I mean, to me, this is the obvious choice for the easiest game on the schedule.
Yeah, I tend to agree as well. Like everybody has said, the talent level being FCS competition, while they have done some good things in their own right in the past few seasons. Really, I think maybe another Group of 5 team could fall beneath them if it weren't for these other two Group of 5 teams that they're playing, because I think both San Jose State and Western Kentucky have a little bit of respective trickiness to them. And so, yeah, I've got Mercer at number 12 as well. Mark, get us started now with number 11. I assume we're all going to be on the same page here, but maybe not.
I'm going with the Spartans of San Jose State. Pretty good offense, suspect defense. They got to make the trip all the way across the country. Another early season game for Auburn where the Tigers should be pretty healthy and shouldn't have depth concerns. So, this is a game Auburn could lose, but I think it's unlikely that will happen.
Yeah, I went San Jose State as well. I kind of tossed around them in Western Kentucky and 10-11 there a little bit, but because it's an early season game, going with San Jose State 11, Auburn should be able to take care of business here. But like Mark kind of said, you do have to be careful. You could look at a Georgia State type situation if you mess around and don't take it too serious at the beginning of the season there.
Yeah, the only thing for me that it's San Jose State for me, the only thing that makes this one really interesting is the familiarity with the San Jose State staff and Brian Harsin and the Boise State guys on the staff, because they played them a couple of times, beat them for a championship one year. And so there's a lot of familiarity with what Auburn wants to do. But other than that, I don't think this is one. You look at them, and the one issue they have is they don't have a really explosive offense. If they were able to score a bunch of points and do those things, that might put a little bit more scare. But I think early in the season, for me, it's San Jose State.
Yeah, new quarterback for them, guy with a lot of experience, Siobhan Cordero, I believe, pronouncing that correctly. He comes over from Hawaii, but like Jason and Mark both touched on, you're not necessarily looking at an explosive offense there, but I believe their defensive line returns a lot of production, and like Jason said, you are going to have that familiarity that could go both ways. It could be a good thing for Brian Harsin and Auburn. They've seen this team might allow them to be even more effective in this game, or it could be a good thing for San Jose State. And you're looking at, like what Christian talked about, you messed around with a team last season that pretty similarly had actually a decent defensive line and sort of a dual threat quarterback in Georgia State, and that game came down to the very end. But I'm the same way. I've got San Jose State there at number 11, and so I feel like because we didn't differ there, we're also not going to differ at number 10, unless you guys are really down on Missouri. I have a feeling where we're all going with number 10. Jason, I assume you've got Western Kentucky here.
Yeah, Western Kentucky there. I think it's a really dangerous football team, especially when it falls on the schedule. When you start talking about where this thing, winds up for Auburn at the end of the year, it's between Texas A&M and Alabama. You played Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Texas A&M, the 3 previous games, 3 physical football games there. And then you have to turn around and play Western Kentucky, who's, they got a lot of talent back from a team that won games. And I think they got 12 or 13 guys on preseason all-conference teams. So it's kind of by default that they're number 10, but it's a dangerous game in my opinion.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. The biggest thing for me is, Zach Kitley, I think his name was, the offensive coordinator who Auburn kind of looked at a little bit there. He's gone. Bailey Zappi has gone, the quarterback. But by the time you get to the end of the season, you'll kind of have some of those kinks figured out. You'll know a little bit more about your quarterback, know a little bit more about the offense, and you'll kind of be rolling a little bit. So it is definitely a very dangerous game that you have to look out for there. Like Jason talked about, kind of sandwiched between some tough games and then the Iron Bowl there to end it. But Auburn should be able to take care of business here.
Last year, Western Kentucky went on the road and gave Michigan State and Indiana really good games, and they played a good Army team very well too. So I think they'll be prepared for the talent level they're going to face at Auburn. The only potential problem I see for Auburn in this game is if they get the pass rushers injured. Auburn's not got a lot of proven guys in that spot. And if they're going to drop back and throw the ball 45, 50 times, you would like to get some pressure on this team. So as long as Auburn's relatively healthy, this is a game it should win, but it's not a walkover.
Yeah, for me, this sort of represents a move to the next tier. Now, Western Kentucky might be in this tier all by itself, but I think this is a little bit more, significant of a challenge than the other teams on the schedule, than the other non-Power 5 teams on the schedule, because like Mark said, their ability to throw the ball around the yard. I know that, Zach Kitley is gone, and obviously, record setting. They're the number 1 passing offense, I think, in the country. Last year, they lost a couple receivers to transfer as well, but they're bringing in Jarrett Dagey from West Virginia. He is the most experienced quarterback Auburn will face all season long in terms, I believe it's like 61 career starts or something like that. Going back, he was at West Virginia. Before that, he was at Bowling Green, a guy that was really comfortable throwing the ball at West Virginia, put up some decent numbers there in the Big 12. And so, like Christian was mentioning, this is a kind of a body blow game between 2 of the most talented defensive lines in all of college football at Texas A&M and Alabama. If Auburn's beat up, or like Jason said, if things aren't going so hot for the season, I think, a team that's going to maybe be ripe for an upset is a team that throws the ball 60 times on a gas defense. And so obviously that's not going to be the norm for this game. Probably 9 times out of 10, Auburn will be just fine here, but I do think this is a little bit bigger of a challenge than either San Jose State or Mercer present. And so now we will get into the SEC plus Penn State. Obviously a non-conference game there, but still sort of in the same league as the SEC competition. Moving on now to number 9. I've got Missouri. That's my number 9. Mark, are you going with Missouri as well, or do you think Auburn's got another easier team in the SEC?
I've got LSU at number 9, Nathan. Okay. And the reason why, the home team normally wins in this series. There's a new coaching staff. They've gone through an immense amount of change in Baton Rouge. I was not impressed with the offensive line last year at LSU. And, if you don't have a good offensive line, that's a big problem, particularly going on the road in the SEC. So I really like Auburn's chances in this game.
Well, Mark and I are going to be way different on LSU. I've got Mizzou at number 9. I just don't think very highly of Mizzou this season. I think the one interesting aspect there is you have the Drinkwitz and Brian Harsin connection from previous stops. But, I just don't think this Mizzou team is very talented. Don't see a lot of quarterback. Running back is gone now. They've got Luther Burden at wide receiver, but one wide receiver can't carry you in a road SEC game. So I think Auburn really shouldn't have too much trouble with Mizzou there.
Yeah, I've got Missouri, but I think it's dangerous just because they have the potential to score some points because, Eli's a guy that knows offense. He can do it some different ways. He can dial up some run game with a quarterback, and they bring in a couple of athletic transfer quarterbacks, guys that can make some plays, including a guy from Southern Miss that has a ton of yards passing for Southern Miss. And so I think it's an interesting game. I do think it's, in my opinion, the easiest of the league games for Auburn. But I do think this is a Missouri team that can create some issues for Auburn because of, offensively they can score points. They recruited pretty well last year. Now, will those young guys be ready to roll, in week 5 and step up and take on some of those things? I think that's a question mark. But I have Missouri at this number 9 spot.
Yeah, so with 9 confidence points, we have 3 Missouris and 1 LSU, and I'm excited to see the difference between Christian and Mark's LSU. I wonder how far down the line we'll get there. Yeah, you lose Tyler Beatty, one of the best running backs in the SEC. Connor Bazelak is gone to Indiana. Brady Cook is probably, from talking to Max Baker a couple episodes ago in our schedule preview, he thinks Brady Cook will probably be the guy there, and I don't know if I have a bunch of confidence in Brady Cook going on the road in his first SEC start and winning that game. You talk about Luther Burden there, Christian. It sounds like he's their number 1 receiver by a huge margin, and so the game plan might just be to loft the ball to him a million times. And so, like Jason said, they do have talent, and with Drinkwitz, number 1, you've got the factor of him wanting to go against his former coach, but also he's a great offensive coach as well. But so we got three 9 confidence points or 9 confidence points. 3 of them are for Missouri, and 1 of them is for LSU. And so we'll go back around now. We've now to 8. I am on LSU here. Jason, who do you have with your 8th confidence point?
I got Mississippi State here.
Okay.
I think the matchup, obviously Auburn loses that game last year. No business losing that game last year at any stretch of the imagination. And Mississippi State, they got some offensive weapons, but that's a team that you would expect this Auburn defense to match up pretty well with. And defense is not a strength of the Bulldogs. I think if not for just a crazy set of circumstances, Auburn wins that game going away last year. And even though Starkville can be a difficult place to play at times, I put Mississippi State here in this spot.
Yeah, I also have Mississippi State. I just think Auburn is coming into this game fired up. I don't see a world really where Auburn loses this game. I think they have something to prove. I don't think you're going to see Auburn give up a crazy amount of unanswered points. I don't, obviously, last year with Bo Nix getting hurt as well didn't help that, but that was mostly on the defense. So I think Auburn comes into this Mississippi State game with something to prove, looking for a little bit of revenge from last season. And I feel pretty confident they'll be able to take care of business there. Because, realistically, they should have won last year's game, and they should have won it pretty big. But obviously they blow it, and I think they're going to remember that, and I think they're going to try and get some revenge this year.
Mark, who you got?
Yeah, I've got Missouri in this spot, and I think Missouri is going to be a lot more talented than it was last year. I think it's going to win more games, and I think Eli is one of the best coaches in the league. So this is mostly me believing in Eli, what he can do as a play caller, and talked to somebody on the Missouri staff who told me he thinks the team's going to be better, and I trust his opinion. So that's why I've got Missouri where I've got them.
All right, so we're starting to get a little bit of variety there in the 8-point range. So 2 Mississippi States between Christian and Jason. Mark's got Missouri, and then I've got LSU. So Mark, start us off now with who you've got 7 confidence points. We're starting to come down here To the middle, we're getting a little bit more shaky, but maybe still leaning Auburn. Who do you have with 7
I don't think you're going to like my pick, some of you guys. Number 7, I've got Arkansas. I think they were a fortunate team last year. A lot of things went their way. They're good, but, I don't think they've got more talented players than Auburn. And as long as Auburn's healthy, this game being at Jordan-Hare Stadium, I think Auburn's going to win the game. Arkansas has got a very tough schedule. Might be a bit beat up by the time they get to Jordan-Hare Stadium. The big X factor is I really like Kendall Briles as a play caller for Arkansas, and I think he's a big reason they overachieved last year, and he's still around. So it's not going to be an easy game, but it's one that I think Auburn can win.
Christian, are we to LSU yet?
No, not to LSU. Arkansas is an interesting pick. I didn't know where to put them. I was kind of tossing them around. I moved them around so much in the rankings just because I wasn't really sure what to think about them. But for my 7, I've got Ole Miss. Losing Matt Corral, he was a big part of last year's offense. Obviously, you do have Jackson Dart. You do have Altmaier, who's returning and was the backup and played a little bit last year. But I'm just a little bit shaky on Ole Miss right now and not really sure kind of where they stack up as a team. You obviously are going on the road there, but that's a place I think Auburn can win, and not win easily, but it's not as tough of a road environment as some other places. So I've got Ole Miss at 7.
Okay. This is good. Now we're getting interesting. Jason?
I've got LSU at 7. I think, LSU is the potential. I think Brian Kelly's a really good football coach. There's just so many moving parts to this team. And, this is part of this is not necessarily what you think of the other team, but about matchup.
Yeah,
I don't think matchup-wise LSU is a big offensive team right yet. Now, they may be down the road, but I think they're going to be defense and run the ball, do those things. To me, that's a better matchup for Auburn than some others. And so I got LSU here at number 7 because I think at home that's not a game that you're going to have to go match teams with a bunch of points. And so I think it's a better matchup for Auburn. So I got LSU at 7.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mark. We'll double up here with Arkansas. I think it also falls on a good spot of the schedule. That was my big reason for them because of the bye week. I mean, I just I see that Georgia going at Georgia at Ole Miss. That's pretty tough for them. That's going to be a tough ask in both of those games. And so you kind of regroup, recalibrate. You'll be glad to be back home. Maybe by the middle of the season, you're also looking at a confident Zach Calzada, TJ Finley, Robbie Ashford. Kind of getting that confidence under center and leading that passing game. And so I'm also with you there. And mainly for me, I think anybody, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, really anybody except for the heavy hitters had come after that bye week, I would have been pretty high on them. Christian, we really differ in Ole Miss. This is going to be interesting. So for our 7 pointers there, me and Mark both go with Arkansas. Christian is going with Ole Miss, and Jason is going with LSU. And so, Jason, now we're on to your 6th confidence point. Go ahead and get us started here.
Yeah, I've got Arkansas at 6. Again, I think it's about matchup. It's a pretty good matchup for Auburn when you talk about you're really a running quarterback. They want to be physical and run the football. That should be a pretty good matchup for Auburn. They've recruited better. They got some key transfers in. I think it's a solid Arkansas team. But the only thing that gives me pause a little bit is almost the reverse of Auburn LSU. Auburn plays really well in Fayetteville, and normally when Arkansas plays well, it's in Jordan-Hare. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a different feel here. But I just think that, this is a game, again, because of the matchup that I think is a little bit more, in Auburn's favor. So I got Arkansas here.
Yeah.
So this is one where I really tossed around Arkansas, but I'm actually going Penn State at 6. I just don't think super highly of Penn State necessarily this season. Sean Clifford, whoever's at quarterback this year for Penn State, don't feel great about them. Don't feel great about them playing in what will be brutal weather at 2:30 in September in Auburn, Alabama. So I'm going with Penn State at 6. I think Auburn, kind of same reasoning as the Mississippi State game there a little bit. I think Auburn wants to get some revenge. And because it is their first big game of the season, you got a couple tune-ups to start there, roll through those, and then roll into Penn State. And I feel pretty good about Auburn there.
Yeah, I'm with Christian. I've got Penn State in this spot. I do think Sean Clifford's pretty good at quarterback. But Penn State only won 2 of its last 8 games last season. And, there's got to be some question about how confident a team is going to be coming to Jordan-Hare Stadium. And Penn State's recruited really, really well the last couple of years. But they've also lost some key guys. But, when I was watching that game in person up there last year, I just kept thinking, Auburn's going to win this game unless it screws up. And Auburn screwed up because I thought Auburn was a more talented team and should have gotten out of there with the win. And, it was an exciting atmosphere. It was supercharged. The fans were really into it. But there was no way that I thought Penn State was a more talented team last year. So, I think Christian mentioned it. There should be a lot of guys on this Auburn team who were upset about the way that game went, and I think they'll be ready to do something about it in the rematch. So it's a game Auburn can certainly lose. It's a game Auburn definitely needs to win, big time needs to win. But it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, we're mostly hit a consensus here. So I'll also go Penn State with my 6th point there. So, I agree. I mean, I think it comes at an early part of the season. That's why I'm me personally, a little bit more confident in Auburn getting a win over Arkansas later on because you do have that bye week and you're a little bit farther along in the season. I think maybe the early season matchup might play into Penn State's favor because it does have that veteran offense. And year 9 under James Franklin, you should put yourself in a position to go win this game on the road in the SEC. But it is interesting now to see us all here kind of thinking the same kind of in this same hemisphere about games like Arkansas and Penn State, because now it's not the toss up. That's not the word you would use, but it's getting into that range where you're saying these are pretty even matchups. And honestly, if Auburn's going to win 7, 8, 9 games, if they're gonna approach their ceiling this season, this is the stretch of games they have to win. Christian, I do want to ask you now, looking at your comparison. So you think Auburn has a better shot at beating Penn State? Okay, hold on, we're backwards here. I'm sorry. You think Auburn has a better shot of beating Penn State at home than Mississippi State?
Wait, no, I already said Mississippi State.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying Penn State. Sorry, I'm looking at it backwards here. Completely disregard that. We'll cut that out of there. So now we'll go on to our 5th point here. Jason, you can go ahead and get us started here. Who has 5 confidence points for you?
Yeah, I'm now on the Penn State bandwagon. I think it's a difficult game because they added some really good transfers to a roster that was pretty good and they recruited well. But this is one, like Mark said, at a minimum, I thought it was a toss-up game last year, and probably the home field might have had a little bit of an advantage. I think now you do the same thing for Auburn. You go, hey, pretty similar type teams. That's a game you should win if you're Auburn, if you're pretty close to talent level, and I think they are in this situation. Unless Penn State comes out and does something different, I think for them a couple of key losses, especially outside of wide receiver. He was a phenomenal player for Penn State last year. You have to replace a guy like that for Auburn. You've got 2 weeks to figure things out with Penn State coming in. Penn State has 2 weeks to kind of fine-tune things because of their experience. For Auburn, you got 2 weeks to figure things out, especially at quarterback. And then you should have really some things that Penn State hasn't prepared for. It should give you an advantage in this game. So that's why I put Penn State here.
Yeah, so I've got Arkansas at 5. And I know it's at 5, so it's kind of on the second half there, but I do still feel pretty confident about Auburn in this game. Coming off the bye week gives Auburn a big advantage there. The only thing that concerns me, Mark talked about it last year, they overachieved. They've kind of just been on an upward trajectory ever since Sam Pittman got there, and I wonder if they're going to be able to continue that, somehow overachieve again this year, and kind of keep things rolling. So that kind of concerns me maybe just a little bit, but I know it's only at 5, but I do still feel pretty darn confident about Auburn in this game.
I'm going with Mississippi State in this spot. I think Will Rogers is very dangerous at quarterback, particularly in this system. If he's healthy and playing well, it's going to be a challenging game. And normally I think Auburn will beat Mississippi State in any average year, no matter where the game's played. But I've got concern about Auburn in this matchup because Mississippi State has got a lot of good defensive players back. They had a problem with their field goal kicking last year. They got a transfer in named Massimo, who's supposed to be really good. So I think this is probably going to be one of Mississippi State's better teams. And, the Pirate is certainly different than everybody else in the SEC on how he calls plays. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge for the Tigers, particularly if Auburn is not real healthy at this stage of the season.
Mark, I dig your wavelength on this show. That is 3 straight picks for us that are exactly the same. Yeah, I'm higher on Mississippi State, I think, than Jason and Christian were. You look at what Will Rogers was able to do, and like Mark said, this team is progressing well under Mike Leach. They took a good step forward last season. You look at returning experience too. That's what Mark was just referencing. Mississippi State, I think, is 15% higher in terms of their defensive returning production than the next best team in the SEC. So you couple that with an experienced quarterback and a dangerous passing game. Now, this is a game where Auburn could go in there and win like 30-3 because you just never know with Mississippi State when Mike Leach is just going to clunk out all of a sudden. But I'm more afraid if I'm Auburn, I'm more afraid of a road game at Mississippi State than a home game against Arkansas or a home game against Penn State, in my opinion. Christian, boy, I cannot wait to hear your LSU take. We better get it here on the 4-pointer, or else this is going to be really interesting. Either way, we're getting into the top 4 now. So this is these are games that we are not super confident about Auburn winning. Although Christian is going to have a little bit of a different list in the end of us, little bit different of a list at the end here than the rest of us. And so, Mark, get us started here with who you have 4 confidence points in.
Well, I'm going with the Lane Train at number 4, and because of his coaching ability and ability to call offenses, and I think he's probably got a really good quarterback in Jackson Dart in this year. And boy, they've really changed the roster. He's figured out how to handle the transfer portal. I think it's going to be a more talented roster than last year. And, they were dangerous in 2021. I think they're going to be a little more dangerous this year. This game is at Jordan-Hare Stadium. I'd probably like Auburn, but over in Oxford, Auburn generally wins over there, but a lot of times it's a struggle. I think this is going to be a struggle as well.
Oh boy! All right, I've got Texas A&M number 4.
All right,
and I'm picking Texas A&M. Texas A&M is going to come to Jordan-Hare, coming off Florida, coming off a couple other tough SEC games. I think Zach Calzada is going to be pretty fired up coming to that game. I still would pick Texas A&M in that game right now, and that's why I've got them at 4. I think that's a really tough defense that Auburn's going to have to face. Obviously, we saw the struggles with that last year when Auburn went to go play at Texas A&M. Unsure a little bit about the Texas A&M offense, but I think that defense can really kind of carry the load and probably will be able to in Jordan-Hare. But I'm very curious to see how that game plays out. I really don't know what it's going to look like. It's going to be very interesting because of just where it lands in the schedule. It's so late in the season. So many things will change, not only from now to then, but just from the first game of the season, even from the middle of the season until then.
Yeah, I've got Texas A&M at 4 as well. I think the matchup is a little bit better for me because of the fact that there's those offensive questions. Now, they're talented. They've recruited at a very high level. A lot of that's on defense. It's going to be tough sledding for just about anybody against this Texas A&M defense for the next few years. It was last year for Auburn. They could not run the football. It's the same guys basically back. On this offense, can you find a way to run the football? And I think it's going to be really hard. And that's where it starts for me in this game. You have a chance because it's at home and in front of the home crowd, but I just think the physicality in this game, and I don't know that either one of these teams gets maybe not even gets into the 20s by the time this thing's over with. But I think it's really tough sledding for this Auburn offense against A&M.
Yeah, I've got Texas A&M as well, so 3 out of 4 of us there. Yeah, I agree. I mean, this reminds me of that. I mean, I think it could be very similar to that 2020 game. I think Texas A&M came into there ranked number 5. In the country. They'll be similarly ranked to start the season. We'll see where they are at the very end. Like Christian said, Zach Calzada will be fired up for this game. It is in Auburn. If last year in College Station didn't go very well, if this one was in College Station as well, you're not thinking very highly of Auburn's chances. But yeah, it figures to be a defensive matchup here. Neither team necessarily is bringing back super high level quarterback play. I am really interested to see what Max Johnson does there at Texas A&M. And so, all right, Jason, we'll go now with the 3 points. So these are the 3 toughest games. I think we probably all have number 2 and number 1 the same, though it'll be interesting to see, what order those are in. But behind presumably those two big rivals, Jason, what do you think the toughest game is on Auburn's schedule?
Yeah, I've got Ole Miss at 3 for a couple of reasons. It's on the road, first of all. Second of all, is where it falls on the schedule. It is the last of a really brutal stretch for this team. It's 7 straight games. Ole Miss is the last, and you're on the road. The third reason is, again, it's about matchup. I would expect Ole Miss to be really good offensively and score a lot of points, and to me, that just doesn't feel like it's a good recipe for this Auburn team. I just don't know that they're a team that's going to go out and score into the 30s and 40s to try to win a football game. And Ole Miss, when you look at what they've done, Jackson Dart obviously coming in, whether he's a quarterback or not, but Michael Trigg at tight end, added a couple of talented wide receiver transfers, offensive tackle that Auburn wanted from the transfer market. They've revamped a lot of this roster, a lot of it's on offense. And so to me, it just doesn't feel like that this team is made to win what could be, kind of a shootout type of game. And so because of that, I've got Ole Miss in there at number 3.
All right, we've officially made it to LSU. So I've got them at number 3. And the reason I've got them at number 3, we're doing confidence. The most confident Auburn wins a game. I have no idea what LSU is going to look like this season. No clue. They could be horrible. They could honestly be horrible, and Auburn could blow them out. And Jordan Hare would not be surprised about that at all. Also, they've got Jaden Daniels. They've got some other quarterbacks that I think could be pretty decent. And Brian Kelly, I do think, is a pretty decent coach. Interested to see how he transitions to the SEC because I haven't thought overly highly of him at Notre Dame in big games especially. And this is kind of probably LSU's first big game. They do play Florida State, but it's Florida State to start the season. So I've got them at number 3 simply because I have no idea what to think about LSU. I don't know if they're going to be really good. I don't know if they're going to be really bad or something in between. So I've got them at number 3 just because I really don't know what to expect out of LSU this season.
I've got Texas A&M at number 3 for several reasons. Number 1, I think this is a team that's going to get better as the season goes along. They didn't really go big into the transfer market. Yeah, they got Max Johnson at quarterback, but not much else. But boy, they've got lots of young talent on this roster in the last couple of recruiting classes. I think these guys will be, get better as the season goes along. And it's game 10 for Auburn. And I don't think Auburn's the deepest team in the world, particularly compared to SEC teams. And, this is the type of game that, in November, injuries could be a factor for Auburn. And plus, Texas A&M comes in and plays well in Jordan Hare Stadium traditionally. And I think that's going to be the case again this year. So that's why I've got the Aggies as the 3rd toughest game on Auburn's schedule.
Yeah, I'll agree with Jason here and pick the Rebels on the road with my 3rd point. And Mark had him just one pick behind with his 4th confidence point. Yeah, like Jason said, it goes along with the positioning of where the game is. Obviously where it is on the schedule. Coming off of that Georgia game, shouldn't be easy to turn right around and go to Oxford to what presumably will be a pretty different team. Georgia, you're talking about very obviously defensive oriented to a spread offense and something that runs very fast at Ole Miss. Now, granted, a lot like LSU, I think Ole Miss is pretty unpredictable on this schedule because they've got a lot of nice pieces. They brought in a huge transfer class. LSU, a huge transfer class as well. We'll see how that translates. I do like what LSU has in terms of coach and Lane Kiffin, and obviously they've built up a lot of continuity there. But for me, I had Texas A&M as I've got more confidence in Auburn beating Texas A&M in Jordan Hare Stadium toward the end of the season once they've sort of figured things out and whatever that even looks like, whether it's a 6-win, 7-win, 8-win team versus playing Ole Miss in the middle of October on the road in Oxford immediately after a huge body blow game against Georgia, where presumably you're going to get thrown around in a very physical game against maybe the most talented team in the country. And so we will now move on to what we have as the second most difficult opponent, the second least confident you are in Auburn. The only teams left for all of us are Georgia and Alabama. So we'll see how those two suss out between the 4 of us. So Mark, who do you have with your second confidence point?
It could be either one. I don't have much confidence that Auburn can win either one of these games. I'll go Alabama at this spot because Auburn played that game really tight against Alabama last year and should give the players who are returning some confidence they can win the game. And Auburn has done well in Tuscaloosa over the years, but I mean, the recent trend has not been good for the Tigers at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And I think this is going to be a tough game because of the talent difference.
Yeah, I'm going with Alabama for the same reason. I mean, just strictly pretty much based off last year's game in terms of maybe Auburn does carry a little bit of confidence going into this game simply because they did learn last year that they kind of can hang with this team if they perform very well. And I mean, Alabama didn't perform very well, but things stacked up in Auburn's favor in that game. So I'm going with Alabama at 2, but honestly, if I could just do Alabama and Georgia both at 1, I probably would. It's kind of just a toss up here between those two teams.
Yeah, I've got Georgia here too at number 2, just because I just think Alabama's much better offensively than Georgia is and much more dangerous offensively. Really, I probably would have Alabama here at 2 for those reasons if they were playing the game in Jordan-Hare again, but they're not. And so because of that, having to go on the road, you're right. Christian, I agree. If you just tied at 1, you'd probably be where you are. But I think Alabama, from a roster standpoint, is the most talented team in the league because of the skill position guys they have on offense and things they're doing. So that's why I've got Georgia here, just maybe a shade behind them, just because it might be a game if you go out and play lights out defensively that you're in the game, in the middle of the third quarter because Georgia's not as dangerous offensively, in my opinion.
Well, it's funny you guys say that because when we crank out a composite on this thing or whatever I'm going to do with it tomorrow, they will be tied for number 1 because half of us had Georgia and half of us had Alabama with the 2 points. So there's no point even going into everyone just explained why they positioned these teams where they were, which is great. I'm with Jason. I've got Georgia with my second confidence point. The only reason I say that is because you look at recent history in games played away from Jordan-Hare Stadium. Alabama, since Cam Newton beat them in Tuscaloosa, in games since then, Alabama scores 46.6 points per game there. And so Auburn, I don't see even coming close to being able to compete with that. Obviously, that's months away. We'll see. But you look conversely, since Auburn won in Athens in 2005, Georgia's scoring total been much lower. Now, that's not to say Auburn has a great shot in that game, but I do think if Auburn, a few explosive plays here and there, a few mistakes from Stetson Bennett, who is not as, I know you just beat Bryce Young for the national championship, but you like Bryce Young maybe as a ceiling and as a quarterback, and he just won the Heisman, a little bit better in terms of explosion on offense. And so I just think when you look at these two games, Auburn could catch some good breaks in Tuscaloosa and they could still lose by 28. I think they catch good breaks in Athens and maybe you've got a 1-score game in the fourth quarter because you're just talking about less proven of an offense that hasn't beaten you into submission every single time you play at their house. And so it will be split there at the top. Like I said, we'll do something, auburnundercover.com. Tomorrow we'll put something up about this list and everybody's picks and go through and give sort of a composite rating for our confidence for Auburn's 2022 schedule. So that was fun, you guys. I appreciate you guys hopping on. We went a little bit long. It's almost 40 minutes here, but we'll continue looking at Auburn's schedule with guests. Obviously, we've got Ole Miss coming up next, and then it's an interesting game against Arkansas, and we'll keep chugging away at that until SEC Media Days. So appreciate you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Auburn Undercover Podcast. If you guys like it, please go leave us a 5-star review. That is the number one thing that helps us out. The intro and outro music is by Beats by Mordecai. You guys can follow him on Twitter, SoundCloud, and Instagram. And if you want, on Twitter, on the YouTube comments, on Facebook, on message boards, wherever, definitely leave us your thoughts on our picks for this schedule. Don't give Christian as much grief as I thought I was going to, because I do get his reasoning a good bit now since he explained himself. But definitely leave us your thoughts on what you think about Auburn's 2022 schedule. And with that, we'll catch you guys later. Everybody have a great rest of the week.